My grandson didn't invite me to his graduation. I sat at a distance in silence. Later that night, I handed his classmate a check for $100, 0 cents K. He had helped me carry groceries for 4 years. I ironed my dress the night before. Soft cotton, pale blue, long sleeves, not fancy, but respectable. The collar was a little frayed and the hem was coming loose, but I pressed it like it mattered. I stood before the mirror longer than I expected. I traced the lines of my face, each wrinkle a testament to nights I stayed up with Linda when she was sick or working overtime to pay for her braces. I didn't recognize the woman staring back, but I felt a familiar ache behind her eyes. My late husband once said it made me smell like spring. He's been gone 27 years. I still wear it when I want to feel real. Kyle was graduating, my grandson, Linda's only son, my only grandchild. I wasn't invited. They didn't forget. I wasn't wanted. Still, I showed up. I woke early, caught the 8:15 bus into town, and walked the last 6 blocks. I carried 3 sunflowers in one hand, his favorite, once upon a time, and a card in the other. Just a small envelope with one sentence inside. I'm proud of you. The event hall looked like something out of a movie. Columns, red carpet, valet parking. There were balloons, a rented photographer, and banners that screamed wealth and curated perfection. I stayed outside, near the curb, just close enough to see, but far enough not to be seen. Before we continue, if this story stirs something in you, please click that hype button, not for me, but for every woman who stayed silent too long. That was the plan, until Linda spotted me. She stepped out of a town car wearing a white silk dress and pearl earrings, her hair curled just right, not a wrinkle in sight. For a moment, she looked straight past me. Then her eyes landed and narrowed. She walked over like I was a stain on her porch. "Mother, what are you doing here?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Her voice dropped, sharp and fast. "You weren't invited. Don't embarrass me. These people, my friends, my colleagues, they don't need to see this." She waved a hand at me like I was a stray dog on a leash. "You're not part of this world," she said. "You're my past. A past I worked hard to bury. Don't you dare dig it up." I clutched the flowers tighter. "I just wanted to say congratulations," she scoffed. "Say it from across the street then, or better yet, don't. Do you think showing up in that dress with your thrift store perfume and your Goodwill shoes is love? It's humiliation." And then she turned her back on me, just like that. I stood frozen. Then I saw Kyle. He was coming up the steps in his cap and gown, surrounded by friends. He looked different. Taller, broader, more polished, his voice deeper, his face sharper. But his eyes were still those same eyes from the sandbox. Or so I thought. "Kyle," I said softly, almost afraid to say it out loud. He stopped. He looked at me. Not with joy, not even surprise, just discomfort. "Old hag," he said, "what are you doing here?" I held out the sunflowers. "I wanted to see you graduate." He looked at the flowers like they were garbage. "Why?" "Because I'm proud of you." He blinked. Then, his voice colder than winter, he said, "You don't belong here. You don't even know what school this is." "I don't have to," I said. "I know you." He laughed, bitter, sharp. "You think showing up now makes a difference? You weren't there for the fundraisers, the interviews, the tours. You didn't help." "I raised your mother," I whispered. "I worked double shifts to keep her in shoes and school books." "That was your job," he snapped. "And honestly, I'm tired of hearing about your sacrifices." I stood still. He turned to leave, but before he did, he looked back one more time and twisted the knife. "You're not someone to be proud of. You just something we had to overcome." The words echoed in my head, long after he'd gone. I closed my eyes and remembered the taste of his tiny hands gripping mine when he learned to walk. I thought maybe, just maybe, that memory was enough. But it turned out love can crack too. He walked away. I stood there, the sunflowers wilting in my hand. No one else saw me. I was the ghost at the celebration. I took one step back, then another. Then I turned and crossed the street, walking slowly towards a small public park across from the event hall. There was a bench near the edge of the trees, half in the sun, half in shadow. I sat there, alone. Across the street, the applause began. Names were called, cameras flashed, people cheered, and I sat quietly, still holding the flowers, still holding the silence, because sometimes silence is all a mother has left. There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, it comes from being erased. That's the silence I lived in, tucked away in the guest room of Linda's house. Not a real guest room, mind you. Just a storage closet they cleaned out after Kyle turned 12 and decided he wanted a gaming room instead. They gave him my old room and gave me his overflow. It had no windows, one electrical socket, a twin mattress on the floor, no bed frame. But I said thank you, because mothers don't complain, not after they've given their youth, their health, their spine. Linda told her friends I was staying temporarily. That temporary lasted 7 years. Every morning I was up before anyone else. I brewed the coffee, fed the dog, took out the trash, folded the laundry nobody asked me to fold, scrubbed the bathtub after her husband left his shaving scum in the drain. Not once did I hear the word thank you. Instead, Linda would glance at the dishes and mutter, "You missed a spot." Or she'd walk in from a yoga class, throw her bag on the table, and sigh, "Can't you make yourself useful?" I was useful, just invisible. To her, I was not a mother. I was an unpaid maid who wore socks with holes and bought dented cans on sale. And it wasn't always this way. Once I was her hero. She was 6 when the bullying started. Linda was small for her age, timid, quiet. The other girls made fun of her shoes, called her garbage girl, because I worked at a diner and her uniform smelled like fried grease. She came home crying every day for a week. I marched to that school in my waitress uniform and begged. No, I knelt in front of the teacher to intervene. I remember the floor was sticky and I was still wearing my apron. I didn't care. I would have scrubbed that classroom with a toothbrush if it meant they would stop hurting my little girl. The teacher looked down at me like I was begging for a discount. Linda never forgot that day. But not for the reason I hoped. Years later, during an argument about me moving in, she spat, "I still remember you kneeling like a dog in that school hallway. Do you know how embarrassing that was?" I blinked. "You were crying every night." She shrugged. I would have figured it out. I didn't need a martyr. I needed a mother who wasn't pathetic. I remember the night Linda told me she was embarrassed. She was 14, standing in the bathroom doorway, holding her platinum blonde wig from her weekend job as school photographer's assistant. She looked at me, my apron stained, my hair mussed, and said, "Mom, you look like a mall Santa after midnight." My heart twisted, but I didn't cry, not in front of her. Instead, I placed the wig in her hands and said, "You taught me how to make a costume look real. That skill will take you places." She glared at me and slammed the door. That moment was a quiet burial of everything I'd ever done. Not for her school, not for her grades, just for being honest. He wanted to take us both, Linda and me, to Colorado, start fresh. I said no, because Linda had asthma and the altitude worried me, because I didn't want her to feel like she was second to a man she barely knew. I chose her. Now she tells people I'm a burden. She introduces me at gatherings as my mother. She's staying with us until we figure something out. Figure what out, Linda? That I stopped being useful? That I got too old to mop the floor without sitting down afterward? She has no idea that I've kept every bill from her childhood, every medical form, every drawing she made in kindergarten, the ones that say "I love mommy" in crayon. I kept them in a shoebox beneath that twin mattress. Kyle once asked me why I never married again. I said because I had something more important to raise. He didn't understand. Linda certainly didn't. She once snapped at me during dinner, after I reminded her not to leave the oven on while she was upstairs. "God, Mother, you're not the head of this house. You're not even the help. The help gets paid. You're just here. Just here." That's all I was, a placeholder, a ghost that cooked rice and kept quiet. Sometimes, after they all went to bed, I'd sit in the kitchen with the lights off, just me and the hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, the weight of memory, and I'd ask myself, was it worth it? All those nights skipping dinner so she could have lunch money. All those shifts I worked until my knees gave out. All the birthdays I spent in my waitress uniform because tips were better on holidays. Was it worth it? If you asked Linda, she'd say I failed, because I made her feel poor, because I embarrassed her, but I gave her everything I had. And now, Now I fold her laundry like a ghost and she pretends I'm not even alive. I sat on the bench at the edge of the park, just across the street from the grand event hall. The kind of place with marble stairs and valet drivers who don't make eye contact with women like me. From where I was, you could hear the cheers, muffled but warm, each time a name was called, and mine wasn't one of them. I had folded the sunflowers into my lap now, hiding them from the wind. The card was tucked into my purse. I hadn't thrown it away. I hadn't cried either, just sat still. Stillness is a thing you learn after 70. It's not weakness, it's protection. There was a big screen facing the overflow crowd. I watched my grandson walk across the stage on that screen. He smiled like he belonged to the world, like he had never once needed help tying his shoes, like I hadn't ever wiped strawberry jam from his chin or read him Goodnight Moon until my voice gave out. He took the diploma, shook the dean's hand, raised his arms like a champion, and not once did he look toward the street where I sat. He didn't even think to. And yet, I smiled. I didn't smile because I was proud. I smiled because I saw something else in the corner of the screen, something more human. A boy in a wrinkled gown, sitting in the back row, struggling to fix his tassel. And moments later, he was standing beside me. He was thin, probably 17 or 18, with curly brown hair and shoes that had clearly walked through more than just this ceremony. He had a water bottle in one hand and a program folded into his pocket. "Ma'am," he said softly, "it's real hot out. You okay?" I blinked. "Oh, I'm fine, son." He looked concerned. "You sure? You're sitting in the sun. Here, take some water." He handed me the bottle before I could argue, and just like that, the lump in my throat softened. "Thank you," I whispered. "That's kind of you." He smiled. "My name's Noah." "Noah," I said slowly, like the name itself had weight. "That's a good name." He nodded toward the event hall. "You here for someone?" I paused. I was. He didn't press, just sat down next to me on the bench, like it was the most normal thing in the world. We watched in silence for a minute. Then he reached into his robe and pulled out a granola bar. "Want half?" I laughed. "No, thank you. But, thank you." He glanced sideways at me. "You remind me of my grandma." I smiled. "Is she around?" He shook his head. "Passed 2 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry." He shrugged. "She would have liked you. She was the only one who remembered my birthday." We sat in silence again, but it wasn't heavy this time. After a moment, I turned to him and said, "It's been a long time since anyone called me ma'am without rolling their eyes." He grinned. "Well, you deserve it." And for the first time that day, I believed it. When the ceremony ended, the crowd burst out with applause again. Noah stood and dusted off his robe. He looked down at me and said, "I'm glad I sat here. You made this day better." And just like that, he was gone. But I held on to his words like they were sunlight, because that boy, a stranger, offered me more kindness in 5 minutes than my own blood had in years. And I didn't need a DNA test to feel it. That night, the house was as quiet as an apology never spoken. Linda and Kyle were still out at the graduation after-party, no doubt shaking hands with donors and snapping photos that would make it to the local paper. I didn't mind. I preferred the quiet. Some things are better done without an audience. I opened the drawer beside my bed, the one with the loose handle, and pulled out the envelope I had sealed 10 years ago. It was yellowed now, the glue stiff, the ink faded where I had once written, in my neatest cursive, "For Kyle College." Inside was a check, $100,000. Every tip I ever stashed instead of spending, every coupon clipped, every coat worn 1 year too long, every skipped birthday dinner so someone else could have theirs. I held the envelope in my lap like it was a living thing. It had waited so long for a moment that no longer existed. At 7:42 p.m., I dialed the number I'd scribbled on the back of a napkin. Noah answered after 2 rings. "Hi, it's Elsa," I said, "from the park." He sounded surprised but warm. "Oh, yes, ma'am. Everything okay? Could you come by? I have something for you." He hesitated. Of course. He arrived 20 minutes later, still in his graduation gown, but now with a jacket thrown over it. When I opened the door, he smiled like I was someone worth smiling at. We sat at the kitchen table, just the two of us, the overhead light humming. "Noah," I began, sliding the envelope across the table. "I've seen you before, you know." He blinked. "You have? For the last 4 years. Every Tuesday and Friday. You'd walk by the grocery store on your way home, see me struggling with bags, and without a word you'd carry them for me. All the way to this porch." His face turned a soft shade of red. "I didn't think you remembered." "I remember everything," I said. "Especially kindness, the kind that isn't loud, the kind that doesn't expect thanks." He looked at the envelope. "What's this?" I nudged it toward him. "It's yours." He opened it slowly, and when he saw the amount, he froze. I can't take this," he whispered. "Yes, you can," I said, "because that money was meant for the future. I saved it for the person I believed would carry my name forward with integrity. But Kyle?" I paused. "Kyle made it clear that my name is something he'd rather forget." Noah shook his head. "I'm not family." "You're more than that," I said, my voice steady. "You're decent. You're kind. You didn't need to help me all those times. No one asked you to. You just did, and that means something." He stared at the check, his hands trembling. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Then I added gently, "Blood is a matter of biology, but character? That's chosen." He looked at me, eyes glossy now. "I won't waste it. I promise." "I know." As he stood to leave, he turned back once more. "Why me, really?" I smiled. "Because you made me feel seen. And sometimes that's all an old woman wants." Noah thought the check was the gift. It wasn't. The real gift came dressed in linen paper and notarized stamps, forged not in secrecy, but in precision. You see, once upon a time, before arthritis stiffened my fingers and my name became something people only whispered at holiday dinners, I was a legal secretary. 32 years at a mid-sized law firm in Evansville. I typed faster than anyone in the office. I proofread wills until I could smell a loophole from across the room. Men in suits used to hand me their life's work and say, "Make it bulletproof," and I always did. I never thought I'd have to do the same for my own. But when you've spent decades watching families rip each other apart in probate court, you learn how to protect what matters, even if what matters doesn't share your blood. 2 years before Kyle's graduation, I started transferring things. Not all at once. Quietly. In pieces. The house? I moved it into an irrevocable trust, one that would dissolve the moment I passed, leaving sole ownership to an educational foundation I had named in Noah's honor. The savings account? Reclassified as an education endowment, dispersed annually to support first-generation college students from working-class Indiana families. The stocks? Liquidated and funneled into a separate fund for housing assistance, also under the same foundation. By the time Kyle turned 18, the only thing I still owned was a broken tea kettle and a few family photos nobody wanted. The rest had already been spoken for, by kindness, by memory, by intent. Noah would never be able to sell the house, no. But he could live in it, learn in it, grow in it. He could run the foundation if he wanted, or pass it on to someone who would. What he couldn't do, though, was be sued for it, because the paperwork didn't mention Kyle, or Linda, or even me. It just said, "In gratitude for sustained, unprovoked kindness." The morning after I handed him the check, I gave him the binder. He flipped through it, confused at first, then stunned. "I thought," he started. I smiled. "You thought too small." He looked up at me, eyes wide. "Why would you do all this?" I tapped the table. "Because this world rewards cruelty with inheritance, but I remember a different way." And then I added, "One day they'll come looking for what they think is theirs. Let them. They'll find nothing but paper and their own absence, written between the lines, because revenge doesn't need to scream, it just needs to be signed, sealed, and filed. They say money changes people, but I've learned something crueler. Money reveals people." It didn't take long after Kyle's graduation for the storm to arrive. I suppose when Linda and Kyle found out the house, the savings, the stocks, everything they thought they'd one day inherit, was gone. They expected me to explain myself. Instead, they got silence. And silence, to a certain kind of person, is like blood in the water. Linda came home the next morning in her designer heels and cheap perfume fury. storming into the kitchen like it still belonged to her. Her mouth twisted into that snarl she inherited from her father, God rest his selfish soul, and her voice cracked through the air like a whip. "You evil, manipulative old witch!" She slammed her hand on the table. "After everything I've done for you, cleaning up your messes, letting you live in my house, this is how you repay me?" I didn't flinch. I stirred my tea, Earl Grey, no sugar. "You lived in my house, Linda," I said calmly. "I just let you feel like it was yours." Her face turned the color of raw meat. "You ungrateful hag! You think you're clever, rewriting your will behind our backs? You think some street rat deserves what's ours? Ours. Such a funny word, coming from someone who never earned a thing." I didn't reply. That made her scream louder. "I shoulda left you in that nursing home when I had the chance." That was when Kyle burst in, red in the face, diploma still hanging crooked in the cheap frame I'd bought him years ago. He pointed at me like I was a roach on his trophy shelf. "You had money this whole time?" His voice cracked, not with grief, but with disbelief. "You made me beg for gas money last month. I told my friends you were broke. You made me look like a damn joke." I looked at him, really looked, and saw the boy I once taught to hold a spoon. Now taller, louder, angrier. "You lied to me," he spat. "You had money and you gave it to that freak? That charity case?" "He's not a freak," I said softly. "He's decent. That's something you never learned." That was when Kyle said it. The thing I'll never forget. "Then die with your charity, you bitter old corpse. And don't expect me at your funeral. I hope you rot alone." The words hung in the air like poison. Linda didn't stop him. She nodded, like she agreed. Like she'd been waiting her whole life for me to vanish. They left. Slammed the door so hard it cracked the frame. But something cracked louder than the door, something between us, long brittle, finally breaking. The news spread faster than I imagined. Small town, big mouths. I didn't tell anyone, but stories have a way of slipping through the walls. A neighbor saw Noah mowing my lawn. Another heard Linda's screaming fit through the open window. Soon, it was all over church bulletin whispers and grocery aisle chatter. I always knew something was wrong with that daughter of hers. "Did you hear? She gave the money to that nice boy instead. Good. That family never treated her right anyway." I didn't ask for their sympathy, but I let it sit there, like warm sunlight through the blinds, quiet, uninvited, but not unwelcome. Not until today, but I will not raise my voice to anyone unless I have a clear communication with you, except PayPal and rape. What surprised me wasn't that people talked. It was how many came to knock. Old neighbors, former co-workers. Even the mailman lingered on my porch one morning longer than usual. "You did the right thing, Ms. Elsa," he said. "Kindness deserves to be remembered." One evening on the news, someone interviewed a teacher in Evansville who said, "Elsa never asked for recognition. She was the kind of grandmother who brought soup during flu season. This gift just brings notice to what the rest of us already knew." Funny, I'd spent so long thinking no one saw me. Turns out they had. They were just waiting for me to see myself. Noah did not squander the gift. That boy, who once helped me carry groceries in the snow without ever asking for thanks, used to check the way seeds use rain, not just to grow, but to bloom. 6 months after graduation, I received a letter. Not from a lawyer, not from Linda, from the office of the Indiana Youth Scholarship Initiative. Inside was a press release, neatly folded, with a small handwritten note at the bottom. "Thought you'd want to see this. N." The headline read, "New statewide scholarship honors grandmothers who raised their kin." Noah had founded a nonprofit. He named it Grandma's Light. He said it was for the students who didn't get bedtime stories, just gas station dinners, for the kids raised by women with swollen ankles and quiet resilience, for the overlooked, for the survivors, for people like me. I didn't cry, but I did sit very still, and in that stillness, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Seen, not as a burden, not as a memory, but as a root, a beginning. A few weeks later, a reporter showed up. Young woman, polite, nervous. She asked if I'd be willing to give a quote for the story. I looked at her, sitting on my porch like truth was something that needed makeup and good lighting, and I said, "Some people are born to keep the bloodline. Others, they keep the soul. That was all I gave her. It was enough. The calls started coming in. Librarians in Des Moines, teachers in Dayton, counselors in Dayton, each saying, "We've got kids who believed no one cared until they got your letter." Every day it felt like I'd built something bigger than one life, something breathing. The article went viral. Apparently, people still wanted to believe in old women and quiet goodness. Donations poured into the foundation. One boy in Kentucky, raised by his grandmother after his parents died in a DUI crash, got a full ride to Purdue. Another girl in southern Illinois, whose granddad worked night shifts to buy her school supplies, used the scholarship to study social work. They wrote letters, not to Noah, to me. Handwritten, like people used to. "Dear Grandma Elsa," one said, "I never knew you, but I think you knew me." I kept them in a wooden box under my bed, not because I needed proof, but because some days I still forgot how to feel proud without guilt. And then one evening, my phone rang. I recognized the number before I picked up. Kyle. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. I didn't want to answer, but I did. His voice was different. Lower. Slower. He asked how I was. He said he saw the article, that he was proud. Proud. I let him talk. He said he understood now, why I gave the money to Noah, why I kept my silence, why I disappeared from their lives without fanfare. He apologized, not with excuses, not with tears, just a sentence. "I'm sorry I didn't see you when it mattered." I said thank you, and then I hung up. A week later, a letter arrived. Linda's handwriting. She wrote 4 pages about regret, about losing her job, her friends, her status. She called me mother for the first time in 10 years. At the bottom she wrote, "I hope someday you'll let us back in." I put the letter away, not out of cruelty, but because I'd already let someone in, and his name wasn't Kyle or Linda. It was Noah. Every Sunday he visited. He brought groceries even when I told him not to. Sometimes we sat on the porch and said nothing, just watched the wind move the trees like time bending back in our favor. Other times, he brought updates about the scholarship. "How many kids this year?" I'd ask. 73, he'd say, all with stories that sound like yours. And I'd smile, not because I needed validation, but because I once thought legacy was blood. Turns out, it's behavior. Evan was always the quiet one. While Kyle lit up every room with noise and charm and entitlement, Evan lingered at the edges. He did not interrupt, did not demand, but he watched. Lord, did that boy watch everything. So when the phone rang one morning and I heard his voice, soft, careful, a little deeper than I remembered, I set down my watering can and sat. "Hi, Grandma," he said, almost like it was a test he wasn't sure he'd pass. "Hi, Evan." Silence. Then, "Mom said I should call. She said to ask if you'd forgive her." I let the wind rustle through the line. Let him feel the weight of the ask, but before I could answer he continued, his voice steadier now. "But I think you don't need to." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "I think," he said, "some things break and stay broken. And that's okay." That boy had more wisdom in his teenaged bones than most adults twice his age. "I miss you," he added quietly. "But I don't miss the way our house felt." I knew what he meant. Regret isn't always loud. Sometimes it shows up in the shape of a kid who chooses stillness over shouting. "I'm proud of you," I said, and I meant it. After we hung up, I went back to my plants. The tomatoes were coming in, the basil was thriving, life, it seemed, still found ways to bloom. I never responded to Linda's letter. I didn't need to. Forgiveness is a choice, not an obligation. I forgave her in the silence, in the decision not to return her pain with my own, but I didn't invite her back. I didn't open the door she had so proudly slammed shut, because here's what I've learned. You don't keep the people who left you on purpose. You bless them on their way out and bolt the gate behind them. I closed the door on Linda's apology as quietly as I could. I didn't need closure. I'd already found peace. The gate wasn't locked out of anger. It was locked for self-preservation. Some afternoons, Noah would come by with updates. The scholarship fund was growing. The porch got repainted. The mailbox replaced. Life didn't roar forward. It whispered, and that was enough. Sometimes Evan would visit too. He never asked for money, never asked for forgiveness, just wanted to sit. Once, he brought me a small box. Inside was a keychain, a piece of wood carved in shop class. It said, "Peace lives here." I kept it on the kitchen hook, right by the kettle. Kyle never called again. Linda sent one more letter that Christmas. I read it, and I burned it. Not in anger, but in ceremony. Some grief deserves fire, not memory. My life didn't end in a courtroom or a hospital bed or a Facebook post asking for prayers. It ended, quietly and well, in a house where basil grew, kids came to laugh, and Sunday dinners no longer tasted like obligation. When I finally passed, there was no drama, just a line in my will, "Let joy continue." Noah kept the house. Evan spoke at the memorial. Not about regret, about peace. And on that day I knew I had not been forgotten. I had been planted, and like all things worth waiting for, I bloomed. 2 years is not a long time, but it is long enough for a garden to bloom again, for silence to turn into peace, and for a woman like me to stop looking over her shoulder every time she hears the word family. The tote bag I carry to the farmer's market is falling apart. Frayed straps, a hole in the bottom corner. But I keep it, like I keep the old measuring cup with no handle, and the rocking chair with one leg a little shorter than the rest. Not because they're perfect, but because they've held through storms. Noah comes by once a month now, taller, stronger, with the calm kind of energy that tells me the world hasn't broken him yet. He never talks too much, just enough to make me feel like I still matter. Today he brought flowers. Sunflowers. "You remembered," I said. "You like the ones that face the light." He smiled. I nodded, setting them beside the old clock in my kitchen. I didn't have the heart to tell him I keep them not because they face the light, but because they find it even when the sky is gray. 2 years ago, Kyle graduated, and I sat alone on a bench, holding a bouquet no one wanted. Since then, the world turned. Noah's scholarship went public. The Grana's Light Foundation grew. Kids I never met started writing me letters, calling me Grandma Elsa, even though we shared no blood. Some sent photos of college acceptance letters. One sent a poem, another a knitted scarf. Linda tried calling on my birthday. She hadn't done that in years. She said, "Mom, I know I messed up, but people are talking. They are asking why I wasn't mentioned in the press. You didn't even—" I stopped her gently. "You weren't mentioned because you weren't there. But I'm your daughter. And yet, you treated me like a debt you couldn't wait to pay off." There was a silence on the line. Then, "I miss you." I didn't answer. I simply hung up. Because missing someone is not the same as making space for them when they're here. Evan, Kyle's younger brother, visits sometimes. He reads quietly in my garden. One day he looked up from his book and said, "Grandma, Kyle sent you a letter." I didn't reach for it. He says he's sorry, that he didn't understand then. I looked at Evan and said, "Some things, once said, echo forever, but thank you for bringing it." I never opened the letter, not because I hate Kyle, but because I no longer want to bleed for someone who only looks for bandages when they're cut. One night, Noah knocked on my door. It was raining. He had just finished his shift at the campus library. "I got accepted," he said. "Master's program, full ride. But I don't want to leave you," I smiled. "You're not leaving me, Noah. You're carrying my light." He cried then. The kind of cry you save for someone who saw your potential before you did. I poured tea, sat by the window and said, "I had a daughter. I raised her alone. I thought love was enough. But sometimes love, unrecognized, turns bitter. And sometimes kindness given without expectation changes everything." A few weeks ago, the city awarded me a plaque, said I was a pillar of compassion. I laughed when I got home, not because I disagreed, but because if only they had seen me the day Kyle said, "You should have died before my graduation." If only they had seen how still I had to become not to shatter. I keep the house quiet now. No television, just the sound of birds and the occasional knock from neighbors dropping off pie or garden clippings. I don't need noise. I have a memory. I once knelt in the rain to beg a school principal not to expel Linda for skipping class. I once sold my wedding ring to buy Kyle a laptop. I once stood in a grocery aisle and watched Noah, just a boy then, offer to carry my bags when no one else even noticed I was struggling. People think legacy comes in bloodlines. I say, it comes in echoes. If this story reached you, if it reminded you of a silence you've kept too long, or a love you gave without applause, then stay a while. Here on Grandma True Stories, we don't shout to be heard. We remember, we reflect, and sometimes we let the past speak, not to reopen wounds, but to show how they healed. If you believe wisdom doesn't expire, if you've ever been the quiet one in the room, or if you're just tired of stories that forget the women who held everything together, then subscribe. Not for me, but for every grandma who was told to be quiet and finally decided not to. I'm glad you were here, and I hope you come back. This was Grandma True Stories, where silence speaks louder than betrayal.